Hey guys, Jason here. Just wanted to circle back around and remind you of kind of this new way that we're doing community groups. We're filming this video each week to remind us of what the sermon was the week before, and then to guide us through just a few discussion questions to help us in our community groups actually interact at a deeper level with the text and the sermon from that week. Just to start off with, I wanted to give us a brief kind of overview of the outline that we walked through this past Sunday from Judges chapter 2. We started off by saying that Israel had a problem. And the problem was that there was a generation that was rising up in Israel that didn't remember the Lord, and they didn't remember the works that the Lord had done. And we kind of took this problem and we worked our way through an outline. We looked at the root of the problem. The root of Israel's problem was that Joshua's generation, the generation that went before, did not pass along their faith to the generation that was coming after them. And because of the root, this being kind of the soil that they lived in, fruit began to pop up in the life of this new generation. And the fruit that was flowing out of that root in the new generation of Israel was kind of twofold. They turned away from the Lord, and they turned towards the gods of Canaan. So this was the fruit that grew out of the root of Joshua's generation not passing along their faith. And then thirdly, and finally, we looked together at God's response to Israel's problem. And we said that God kind of had two responses there. One, God was angry. His anger was kindled against this generation's unfaithfulness. But secondly, we saw God's compassion, that God was moved in pity in response to the suffering that He Himself caused, in discipline in the life of Israel, and that He responded with compassion to them by sending judges. This just kind of gives us some of the framework of the outline of the sermon that we went through. Now I just want to ask us a few questions, and we'll let these questions kind of guide our discussion together. To start off with, I'd love for you guys to open your Bibles just to kind of get us back on the same page and actually spend a little bit of time just reading the text together. So if you'll start Judges 2, verse 6, and just read together through verse 23. Go ahead and do that now. All right, we'll dive into the questions. Here's our first one. The root of Israel's unfaithfulness was that one generation failed at passing along their faith to a new generation. So spend a couple of minutes together sharing your own experience from your life, both positive and negative, about how the generation before you either did or did not pass along their faith to you, and maybe some of the ways that you feel like you're affected today because of that either positive or negative example. Go ahead and spend a few minutes together now talking about that. All right, here's our next question. We said that the only thing necessary for one generation to lose the faith of their fathers is for nothing to happen. No plan, no intentionality. So what I'd like for us to do now is to talk together a little bit about how you yourself are planning to pass along your vital, life-giving relationship with Christ to the generation coming after you. What's our plan? What are we going to do to make sure that the next generation of Bluff Park Community Church is here and is walking with Jesus in a vital relationship? What's our role and how do we plan on filling that? Go ahead and talk about that for a few moments. Next question. We said that there was no neutral in the gearbox of the human heart. We're either moving towards God, closer to God, or we're moving away from Him. What are some of the false gods in our culture that entice us away from faithfulness? And then kind of the second part of that question, how does the gospel empower us in turning away from those false gods back to the one true God? Let's have some discussion around that. Next question. God reacted to Israel's unfaithfulness in two ways. First, he was angry, so his hand was against them. And then secondarily, he was moved to pity and compassion. So he sent Israel respite through judges. Discuss your reaction to a God who sends severe discipline to purposefully create misery in the lives of his people. And I want us to talk a little bit about how that might actually be grace. Let's talk about that. And next, even when God, in his grace, sends Israel a new judge, the revival is always short-lived. How does the failure of Israel's judges point us to our need for Jesus? Thank you guys again for being willing to engage in discussion around possibly a difficult text. Really hope and pray that our time together has been beneficial both to us as a community but also individually in our walks with Christ. So thank you again. Blessings on you. Have a great week.